Is Fantasy Island 2020 awesome or awful? Time to dig in and answer that question. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Mike from fearshop.com. Today we're digging into Fantasy Island in 2020. Was it awesome or awful? We're going to get to the bottom of that today. The way this video series works is we pick a movie, usually a movie that has a lot of people for it and a lot of people against it. We list out the awesome parts, we list out the awful parts. At the end of the video, we will have the verdict and we'll label that movie as awesome or awful. Alright, so a little bit about Fantasy Island. The synopsis of the film: when the owner and operator of luxurious island invites a collection of guests to live out their most elaborate fantasies in relative seclusion, chaos quickly descends. So the film stars a highly attractive cast, including Lucy Hale, Portia Doubleday, Maggie Q, Stowell, Michael Peña, and Jimmy O. Yang. You know, basically like every group of people. So, director Jeff Wadlow is best known for Kick-Ass 2, True Memoirs of an International Assassin, and Truth or Dare. Kick-Ass 2 rocks. It's just a great film. So, in case you didn't know, Fantasy Island was a television show that ran from 1977 to 1984, in which Ricardo Montalban played Mr. Rourke, the head of a mysterious island resort, who, along with the assistance of Tattoo, played by Hervé Villechaize, would each week greet a new crop of guests and somehow make their deepest, though still suitable for television fantasies, come true. Still, virtually every television show with a recognizable name seems to have been transformed into a feature film, so it was perhaps inevitable that Fantasy Island would follow suit. Not sure how this film ended up with Blumhouse, the production company known for films such as Paranormal Activity, The Purge, Insidious, Get Out, and plenty of others. I for one, was pretty excited to see this. The TV show was hit or miss. You know, I seen a bunch of episodes, I guess. I mean, it was definitely my era. And the film, the TV show wasn't half bad. The film, I started playing around in my head. I was like, wow, there's a lot that you could do with this concept. So I was pretty excited for it. And the trailer, is definitely, they were focusing more on the more horrific type of desires. So it definitely felt right to me, and it felt like it was going to pan out well. So the setup is reasonably familiar to anyone who recalls the show. The plane arrives at a mysterious island presided over by Mr. Rourke, played by Michael Peña. He announces his guests, all of whom have apparently won a contest. So they're going to have their greatest fantasy fulfilled with only two caveats. Each guest gets only one fantasy, and they must see said scenario through to its natural conclusion. Obnoxious alpha male JD, played by Ryan Hansen, and brother Brax, Jimmy O. Yang, they want a chance to live the high life. Former cop Patrick, played by Stowell, wants to live out his dream of being a soldier. Self-loathing Gwen, played by Maggie Q, would like to take back the moment when she turned down her boyfriend's marriage proposal because of her sense that she didn't deserve happiness. The fantasy of Melanie, played by Lucy Hale, is a little more cut and dry, having spent her childhood being tortured by a bully, played by Portia Doubleday. She wants to get her revenge on her. Suffice it to say, these scenarios do not play out quite as planned, and it becomes quite apparent that the island contains any number of deadly secrets. Sounds pretty good so far, I'll admit. There's some cheesy aspects to that, but it sounds like we're cooking with gas and we have somewhere to go. So the idea of this film and exploring the darker side, again, not bad if it's executed properly. So let's do what we do in these videos and break down the awesome parts and the awful parts to see where we land. Awesome. It's at least watchable. I'll give it that. Outside of being watchable, I thought about it a little bit, right? And I thought about, like, hey, like, what else could they have done? Or, which parts failed? A lot of movies I see, it's basically inside my brain and then leave, and I completely forget about it. Another element in here that's actually, I'm going to call it awesome because I don't exactly have a gray area. Most of the characters are actually somewhat memorable. how many films have we seen, horror films, I should say, that we've seen, you watch the film and then you think about it the next day and you're like, I can't put a face to anybody. I remember the story, I remember plot points, but I don't remember faces. That has happened far too often, right? And I will say at least the majority of the faces I still remember. And that has to be something good. Another awesome aspect, the outside scenery is just beautiful. It really is awesome to watch. Another awesome element, again with the characters, you at least care a little bit about some of the characters. Again, in movies where you have the forgettable characters, you really don't care what happens to them, and I think you get a little something to that here. Another awesome aspect, I love the idea of making a horror movie based on the classic TV show. There are a million ways to take this and make something fun. Alright, jumping into the awful elements, you need more than just attractive people to make a film work. I have no hate on attractive people, love looking at them, but you need a little more. Another awful aspect, the film runs at least a quarter of an hour too long. Some say it ran an hour and 45 minutes too long. Another part, I don't know where to go with this one, to be honest. So Michael Peña, he's typically awesome, pretty good. I will say that he may have looked like he was kind of just getting, just running through the motions in this one. It was kind of weird. He definitely didn't feel like he was into it. So we'll leave that one on the table for now. The one that's unforgivable to me, the awful part. There's no scares. Nothing remotely horror. I mean, it's you had the ability to really get some scares out of this and got nothing. Another awful element. There was a lot of ideas that seemed to come out of nowhere just to fill screen time. As I already mentioned before, they weren't looking to fill screen time. I mean, there was plenty of screen time in there. Not saying every film has to be 90 minutes, but as soon as you make a film go beyond 90 minutes and there's any kind of fluff added, people will call you out on it. Another awful element. You have a torture scene, zombie-like creatures and eyeballs dissolving in black goo, but none of it presents horror at any point ever. Another awful element. The torture scene was directly inspired by Saw, whether or not they want to admit it. I big fan of at least the original Saw and a bunch of the movies. I mean, it's not a Saw video, but let's just say I'm not a hater of the Saw movies. Another awful element to Fantasy Island, they tried to do too much. I mean, perhaps 4 fantasies were too much if they really wanted to dig into them sufficiently. At the end of the day, they really did not flesh out any of them as much as they probably should have. Maybe cut those fantasies in half, devote a little bit more time to each of them, and maybe you've got something there. Another awful element. The worst fantasy had to be how Patrick's fantasy was to enlist in the military to honor his late father and where that story went. That one just bugged me. I mean, they had the one with the 2 girls and the one wanted to get revenge, and that would have been, that was a little bit more. They could have literally done a movie on that, like we've never seen a revenge kind of movie like that. But the one with Patrick's fantasy could have just been X'd out of the movie, to be honest, in my opinion. Probably somewhat along those lines, my last awful point is bouncing around from fantasy to fantasy is very disjointed. There's no sense of narrative cohesion here. You're just kind of going from one to the other, and then you're trying to remember, wait, what was this person's fantasy? And it's just, there was a lot of bouncing way too often. And to be honest, I could just keep going with a lot more of these awful parts, but at the end of the day, Fantasy Island offended me a little because I expected more out of it, and it just did not deliver. Not holding a grudge against it, I'm just saying, didn't deliver. So, at the end of the day, our verdict is Fantasy Island is an awful movie. Okay, so it looks like Fantasy Island is indeed awful because the awful parts outweigh the awesome parts. Doesn't mean I'm not going to watch the film again. Although I do find it hard to want to, though. I'm sure if I'm sitting there one day and I see it, somewhere, like whatever, comes up as like on Prime as like one of the featured streaming ones, I probably will put it in. Whether or not I make it to the end of the movie, that's a whole different debate. Alright, in the comments below, tell me your verdict on Fantasy Island. Was it awesome or awful? So that wraps this one up. I want to hear from you. Post your thoughts on this video. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you share this video. Make sure you subscribe. But most of all, make sure you keep it horror.